The Giants' 2022 wide receivers core was one of the worst wide receiving cores I've honestly seen in my 34 years of living. And that says a lot, right? I think the Giants have had such strong success with so many good wide receivers over the franchise's history that maybe we've been led to believe that someone could come in and pull a Victor Cruz when given the opportunity to do so and step up and make plays and solidify themselves as that next giant great wide receiver. Unfortunately, this season, none of that happened. And it's kind of easy to see why we were at the bottom of the league from a wide receiver perspective. When looking at the depth chart, for example, you have Isaiah Hodgins, Richie James, and Darius Slayton. Obviously, Darius Slayton, I guess we could just get started and go down the line here. Darius Slayton was drafted out of Auburn, been on the Giants for quite some time now, getting to the end of his rookie contract where he was kind of a good playmaking downfield explosive sort of speed target, but very inconsistent. He had that one bad drop versus the Vikings in the playoffs, and he did have a couple bad drops throughout his career as a Giant, and I think that consistency really plagued him throughout. I don't know exactly what he would want from a free agency standpoint to come back, but I'm completely fine with moving on from him at this point in time and just testing the waters and see what else that we could find through hopefully the draft, but also free agency. So thank you for your service, Darius Slayton, but we'll see you later. Next up on this list are two various folks who did have a pretty big stake in this last season's success from a wide receiver perspective. And the first name on that list being Isaiah Hodgins, as he was a more recent member to join off the scrap pile, as he had some background with Dabboll and Schoen from his time at the Bills. From their time at the Bills, and Hodgins was signed off of the Bills practice squad in the middle of the season. I think it was maybe before the bye week. And then that gave him a week to acclimate a little bit. And then he did play a pretty big role. The guy looked good. The Giants just re-signed him, I believe, to a 1-year deal. So I think he'll definitely be in the mix next year again. And it will be great for him to have a full offseason and camp under him to see how he can develop alongside Jones if he's playing quarterback for us or whoever else is under center next year. It was very Hollywood for him, so I'm really glad that he is getting another shot with us, because I think his work ethic and the plays that he did make in big spots definitely is worth it. Is he a top 3 wide receiver in my opinion? The answer is no. He was kind of thrust into a big spot because there was no one else that could really do that. We didn't have those guys. Um, Moving on, next on the list was Richie James, who was a scrap heap guy coming over from the 49ers in the preseason. And after the preseason cuts, he kind of played a lot in punt returns and, also just getting a lot of time from a wide receiver position standpoint. He did play pretty decent for the most part. He had a couple key bad fumbles here and there. But, for someone who didn't really know the offense because he wasn't with any of these guys in the offseason or camp, he did play fairly decently. So I will give him the benefit of the doubt there. Up next on the list is Sterling Shepard, obviously a huge Giant fan favorite. I'll always love Shep, young Shep. I do respect him. I think after you do see some drop off early on in his career after his first and second season. And then obviously the last 2 years have been really plagued with some terrible injuries. Achilles last year, ACL this year. So it's really, really tough to come back from that from a wide receiver perspective when really all of your speed and explosive ability comes from your legs. Having said that, is this the end of the road for him? Maybe. It's really hard to tell, how your body would react to catastrophic injuries in back-to-back seasons. So it is, makes sense to why the Giants didn't re-sign him to come back this year or for this offseason and released him. And that doesn't mean we've seen the last of him. He was so gung-ho on the sidelines, always around, cheering on everyone. He's a great locker room guy. He was the longest tenured Giant going into this season. So I think in some capacity they could look to take him back on a very, very, very league, veteran minimum deal. with a chance to do the rehab in New Jersey and get better and potentially, be a great story of redemption. After that, kind of similar player, and also had a catastrophic knee injury in his best game as a Giant was Wan'Dale Robinson, who in that one game that he did get hurt had over 100 yards. So it's like, I think he had 10 receptions and 100 yards receiving, and he got knocked out of the game. There was only two wide receivers who had over 100 yards this season. It was Wan'Dale Robinson in the game that he tore his ACL, but he was actually pushed pretty far out of bounds, so there should have been a penalty on that. And the other one was Isaiah Hodgins. But I do feel, Wan'Dale Robinson was starting to get his legs underneath him. Being a rookie slot wide receiver, you're probably undersized, and there's a lot of big guys in the NFL, especially linebackers and safeties that are looking to take your head off. Did take him some time to get used to that and kind of settle in. And when he did, he had a very good rapport with Daniel Jones, which was great to see. I don't know, like just based off of when he tore his ACL, it seemed to be like around the holidays, a little before that. So could he be back by the time camp starts? He'll probably be like pretty worked back into the swing of things. And again, another wide receiver tearing their ACL, who knows, what kind of impact that has on their explosive ability. But opposite of Sterling Shepard, Wan'Dale Robinson's probably like 22 years old. So way different points in their career compared to Shepard, who's almost 30, and Wan'Dale Robinson, who's 22. Hopefully Wan'Dale can use this time to rehab and get that explosive speed back and come back ready to work, because the Giants are going to need him at wide receiver next year. Yeah, the two guys, if we're talking about good, bad, and ugly, the ugliest part of this whole season, and I think kind of screwed the Giants at the end of the day, was the Gettleman-Kenny Golloday contract. Kenny Golloday really couldn't even play at all this year, which is pretty unfortunate, because I was holding out hope that he would be able to start playing at some point. Again, it never really got it going. He did have a freak one-handed catch versus the Eagles in that meaningless last regular season game, which was absolutely hilarious just to see like kind of what he can do. Not that he really ever did it besides that moment. But yeah, obviously he'll likely be cut because I don't see any window where he does come back and play for the Giants. Then also Kadarius Toney going into this season. If those two guys would have just done what they needed to do and played well, I think we're looking at, a kind of a different year for us. But regardless, it didn't happen. So we had to ask a lot out of, Isaiah Hodgins, Richie James, and Darius Slayton. Other couple, background guys looking at depth chart, was David Sills, who had plenty of opportunities this year. I think he'll probably be gone. He just never stepped up when any opportunity was given to him, even though he's, perennial, always looks good hanging around in camp and in the preseason as well. Colin Johnson, on the other hand, I thought he had a great preseason in those games we did watch. I think he tore his ACL in that last one, unfortunately. So he's getting a little bit older now, but he is tall at least. So let's see if he could come back and, maybe get a chance at one more preseason with the Giants to see if he can make the team. I think regardless of these folks that I'm talking about right now, lead us to the next topic, as the Giants really need upgrades in wide receiver. I'll probably do a closer video when it comes to this, when free agency truly does open and the mock drafts are going around, because I think there's a lot of good wide receiver talent in this draft, or at least the last few years there have been as well, where the Giants can capitalize on this. And I think, I truly believe what Dabboll and Sean are trying to do here is really build through the draft. And last year they only had their first opportunity to do that. This year, much more capital, much more availability for a full scouting offseason to figure out how they want to go about building out this team. And first and foremost, there were just so many holes at the wide receiver position. So I would love to build through that through the draft. When you look at the wide receiver free agency class, it does look rather weak at this point in time. And, you see the names like T. Higgins being thrown around. I could go into details about all certain guys about like why I don't want to pay them. So I'll have more in a video like that to come up. But as you can see, I think, I actually wanted to do a video about the Giants wide receivers during the bye week. I didn't get a chance to do it because I would have liked to see my thoughts from then to where I am now. But I honestly don't think they would have changed too much, because the wide receiver room this year was kind of snake bitten early on, and it never had a chance to get really going. It asked a lot from guys who haven't been put into this NFL really, wide receiver role where they have to make plays, they have to be the number one guy. And I think you saw that reflected in Daniel Jones, where they were going to run a lot more and not have to focus on spending or standing in the pocket and waiting for guys to get open, because they really don't have the ability to do